the feelings there they're often displaying are confusion, maybe sadness. Often that's coming out in anger, substance misuse, drugs and alcohol, conflict in their relationships, and a lot of those things are going on. I think often men present with anger more than sadness sometimes, although that's a bit of a generalisation, but I think boys don't cry, all of that stuff's still around a lot more, those ideas, and so I think men find it maybe more easy to express their feelings through anger than they do through sadness. But and often it's because men have run aground really their traditional ways of coping with difficult situations, challenges in life, whether that's from work or relationships or just how they're feeling. The traditional ways of coping have started to break down or have broken down, so they're no longer functioning as well in their everyday lives and struggling. So those are generally sort of the things that they present with. I think men in general struggle to talk about their feelings a lot, even with their close partners or relatives, parents, etc. I think they still struggle with that. I don't think modern society particularly helps that. I think there's still a lot of messages around that men shouldn't be sad or shouldn't cry, and that they you don't talk about your feelings with your mates in the pub, lads together. You don't talk about how your negative feelings perhaps, and that's still very socially unacceptable, I suppose. And then I think specifically with sexual violence towards men, I think there's a lot of men that come forward often come here to talk about their issues, often feel very critical towards themselves, that they should have been able to defend themselves from a sexual attack, they should have been stronger physically or something, that they should have been capable of protecting themselves, because a lot of those messages are around. So I think that could often be increase their anxiety and distress really by the fact that they, as well as having had a terrible incident happen to them, they're also telling themselves off or criticising themselves for the fact that they weren't able to stop that from happening. I think that men still have a reluctance to come forward and report these issues. I think there's a bit of a crisis of funding for men's work, because I think I consider myself to be a feminist, in that I believe that women, have needed to have their revolution and come and move forward in life, and that's still ongoing, pay gaps, etc. But I think within that push for women's issues, somewhere along the line, some of those men's issues have been lost as well, and I think that their voice perhaps isn't as strong around those support issues. And I think as a consequence of that, a lot of the funding streams seem to go towards female services and not towards male services as much. The problem you've got is with small organisations like us, we have a limited amount of resource to actually raise awareness. But I mean, recently there was an article in The Sun which was good, and they quoted Martin from here at reasonable length, and that was quite good. So I think the media picking up more on these issues. I think men themselves coming forward and being prepared to speak about their experiences in the media. I mean, I know a few years ago, for example, when people were talking about bipolar and manic depression, there were several famous people like Stephen Fry came forward, and I'm trying to think of his name, politician Alistair, I can't remember, but he was a Labour politician, quite prominent politician who came forward. And I think people who have experienced those things, who may be famous or more in the public eye, I think if they can acknowledge that these things have happened to them sometimes, those kind of people draw attention and draw those issues out. So I think that would be helpful. I think funding, increased funding to organisations that can promote these things would help raise an awareness, but that's a bit of a chicken and egg, because you don't get the funding if they don't see it as a problem. You can't identify the problem and promote the fact there is a problem unless you've got the funding.